Good day to everybody, and probably good morning to most of you. I hope you had a good night's sleep, enjoying your sleep after the various topics that we discussed yesterday. And I hope these topics gave you food for thought in the next couple of days to think about what kind of vision we like as young people from Southeastern Europe. My name is Blažen Maleski, and I shall be your moderator today on the panel World Risk 2.0. Today we have quite a diverse group of topics put into one panel. Sadly, I'm here alone in the studio today. Everybody will be connected through Zoom. But that doesn't mean that I don't have people around me who are physically distant from me, but socially close to me. And I hope you took that lesson from Professor Markovic yesterday, who said social distance doesn't mean that you have to be distant from each other. And these are the venues that we kind of join together and talk about the various aspects of life. So today's topic, World Risk Society 2.0, we have three very specific topics that are big in themselves. We have four speakers today, and the three topics that we'll be discussing are racism and nationalism, gender inequality, and youth detachment. We have fine speakers who will give us an overview of what is happening in Europe and their views on how things are at the moment. So I'm very pleased to be your moderator today and try to bring closer these topics and give you an overview of what is going on. As a moderator, I'm also in the chat, so whenever you're typing questions or similar activities, I will have an overview of everything that is going on. I know that yesterday it was kind of chaotic and there were a lot of chat comments, but also feel free when we have the Q&A session to raise a hand and also join the discussion with your voice, because you have to be a voice, not an echo. So, and it's kind of difficult to be a voice when it's only written on the chat. And today we start off with racism and nationalism. Our today's speaker on this part of the panel is Panagiotis Paskalidis. I hope I pronounced this name right, because it's quite difficult for me to be accurate when it comes to Greek names. I hopefully said the name right. He comes from Eliameb, Greece, and thank you to Eliameb, who are also organizing the hub in Athens, and also the participants from Thessaloniki, Mari Drodzopoulos, who is also in the participants list. Thank you very much for being here today. I would say the floor is yours on giving us the overview on what is going on with nationalism. Is nationalism and racism holding us back as a region? And what is the current state of play? I would say I would give you the floor, but as you can see, I'm here alone, so I give you the Zoom link.
Digital, yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Maleski and all the participants. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers, Youth Alliance, Group, and all the organizations for their invitation. And I'm very happy to be with you, even from a distance, because it's very important to continue cooperating and finding topics to discuss all the time until the situation becomes better. Now, just a few words for myself. I'm Panagiotis Paskalidis. I'm with Eliameb, the Hellenic Foundation for European Foreign Policy, based in Athens since 2015. I work as a researcher in the department dealing with Southeast Europe, headed by Professor Ioannis Armakolas. who's a professor in the Department of Balkan Studies in Thessaloniki, with Yannis Sarmakoulas and the other researchers of our program, including Mary Drosopoulou, which you know, of course. We're working for a few years now in many projects, and most of them are dedicated to promoting mutual knowledge in Southeast Europe. Many times having Greece as a focus, but in other cases with more general matters like democracy and other topics. Today, also about myself, I must note that I'm mostly dealing with media and media representations of other Balkan countries in Greece, but also we're trying to have this global view, not only how Greece and Greek media view the neighboring countries, but also how the neighboring countries and their public opinions view Greece. We try to have an image as global and as comprehensive as possible. So for today, I will, before sharing my screen with my presentation, I will just give you the general topic will be racism and nationalism in our current context. I will try to connect it with the notion of the risk society, and also from the media perspective to show how dangerous it is. And I will try to view racism and nationalism as two risks, of course, correlated for our modern democracies. And of course, to link them to the digital public sphere that we have as societies since the internet, and specifically since the second phase of the internet, since the early 2000s, the Web 2, as we call it. So this will be the general topic. As you will understand, it's not necessarily focused on the Balkans or Southeast Europe, but of course we can elaborate more and make the connections in the Q&A and general discussion after my presentation and all the presentations, of course. So let me begin. I hope everything is as it should. So this is my topic. It's racism and nationalism in the age of fake news and post-truth. We know, of course, fake news. We'll discuss a bit about post-truth, but this is, let's say, our two elements, very alarming elements in our digital public sphere. So the basic components of my presentation, I will briefly discuss the concept of risk society as developed by Ulrich Beck, and then I will present my understanding of nationalism and racism as risks in the context of this concept of risk society. And then I will move in the third part and discuss nationalism and racism in the media with regard to fake news and post-truth. And of course, I will try to see the relevance and the importance of civil society in these questions. Now, I don't know if this was the original intention when this session was designed, but I want to congratulate the designers and the people who proposed it, because the concept of the risk society or world risk society was developed by Ulrich Beck in a rather distant period in the early 1990s. But I think it's very relevant still today. Because, of course, in our post-Cold War society, we can describe it in many ways. We can describe it as the post-industrial society, or the globalized society, or the information society, if we give emphasis on the new patterns of communication, mass communication. But risk society is a very interesting concept. And with that, Ulrich Beck wanted to show that even though modern industrial or post-industrial societies have managed to tame and regulate, if you like, the risks coming from nature, they find it very difficult to regulate and respond to the challenges that stem from their development and their modernization. And one of the examples that Ulrich Beck used very frequently was the ecological crisis. Now, in our modern context, of course, we see that there are a lot of challenges, not only for the national, but also the international level, like the ecological crisis, health risks, security risks, mixed migration flows, and more generally, the effects of globalization, the divides, the inequalities, the marginalization of societies. So all these, which of course we can relate to the development of modern societies in the sense that Ulrich Beck proposed, shows that we are still struggling to find ways to regulate and respond to these challenges. The basic idea of Ulrich Beck was that modern societies, instead of emphasizing the production of goods and the many good things that they are able to produce, risk societies, they tend to try to avoid the bads because they find it difficult to respond to all these challenges. So I think that it's a very valid concept for our modern state of affairs. And before I make it more specific with my presentation, I would also like to give a few elements about nationalism and racism as risks. Now, in the context of the Cold War, nationalism in particular was mostly correlated with the process of decolonization. In the post-Cold War period, we had a very impressive proliferation of ethnic conflicts and also a form of nationalism that was centered around ethnic identity and also the change of borders. Now, of course, in Southeast Europe, we had a very tragic experience of such conflicts. But I would also like to say that because we often focus on former Yugoslavian, the post-Yugoslav space, I think that it was a more generalized phenomenon, this nationalism that always in Southeast Europe that reminded us of previous periods of the Ottoman Empire. And of course, Greece also had its share with a very promising and optimistic development in the very recent period, being the settlement and the Prespa agreement, which settled the 30-year-old dispute with North Macedonia, the old Macedonian question. So just to say that in Southeast Europe, it wasn't only about former Yugoslavia, it was a more general matter. Now, of course, in the recent past, we have many examples of nationalist and racist discourses, particularly in this period of the economic crisis since 2010 and until today, I would say. I think that this is, of course, not only for Greece, but I mean, the context of the economic recession and the difficulties that many states face in societies face in Europe. I think that there are many examples. We could refer to elections, or we could refer to referendums, with, of course, Brexit being a very indicative case. And also, of course, very important example, the coverage and the public discussions when it comes to the mixed migration flows in Europe since 2015 and until, of course, today and very recently. Now, the important difference with previous periods was, of course, that such discourses and rhetorics, the nationalist and the racist rhetorics, have a very alarming appeal in societies. And of course, we can, on the one hand, explain this with in the general framework of the disenchantment with globalization, the disappointment, the sense of marginalization. But of course, we can also relate it to the different functions that our digital public sphere has in our information societies. And of course, by that, of course, I'm referring to the not only the social media, but more generally, some very negative aspects of communication or information in the digital environment. We all know the phenomenon of fake news, and also, but when of course when we refer to fake news, as we know, there's a very complex typology of fake news, and we must be very careful sometimes in our definition. By fake news here, I mean the explicit lies, the disinformation, the use of lies in order for propaganda reasons, obviously, and also for the purpose of disorienting the public explicitly. And also, there's a very interesting side effect of domination of fake news in our digital public sphere. It's this atmosphere of post-truth, which is actually a context very, very alarming, because it suggests that we are heading towards an environment where a public sphere, rather where emotions and beliefs will be more important than facts when it comes to determining what is true. And of course, if we look at the elections in the United States these days, we have many examples, particularly coming from President Trump, of how this logic of fake news and post-truth is working. And this is something very disorienting and something very alarming. Now we know that also in Europe, the European context, with many examples of nationalist and racist and populist, of course, discourses that have used such elements. I think that the Brexit campaign is a very indicative example, as I already mentioned, but you can find such elements in many countries. Now, always in the context of the media, but not only the digital media, also the more traditional media. We know that nationalism and racism were always major concerns, because here we can, the very basic pattern when it comes to such discourses was the fact that usually, most commonly, the vulnerable groups, such as minorities, refugees, or migrants, were either underrepresented. This means that they were invisible in the media content, or irrelevant, or victimized in the representations, or misrepresented, which means that they were frequently stereotyped, demonized, or scapegoated, or even whitewashed. Now, this is something very, I think, very important, and in our studies and reports with ELIAMEP, when it comes to, for instance, I can refer to the studies that we have conducted when it comes to the representations of Albanian immigrants in Greece. Apart from the stereotypes, a very important finding that we had was the invisibility of such populations. And this is something that it was also confirmed in the case of the refugee and the mixed migration flows, when it comes always to the Greek media. So this is just to show that when we are discussing nationalist or racist dispositions in the media, it's not necessarily only something which is explicit, like the negative stereotype. Sometimes it is more subtle, and for instance, the invisibility of these populations and groups in the media, if it's a long-term characteristic, it can also indicate a very such a negative and nationalist disposition. And this is a very, I think, a reasonable hypothesis that we can advance is that, of course, nationalism and racism were always very negative and very corrosive when it comes to our democracies. But in the present context, with the digital public sphere and some of its negative characteristics, like fake news and false truth, this is a very destabilizing framework. They have maximized their appeal. So in this sense, we can consider them to be risks like Ulrich Beck proposed the concept of risk in the risk society. In other words, some technological, very important technological developments that have consequences that we find difficult to regulate or respond to. Now, when it comes to ways to neutralize the effects of such phenomena, be it in the digital or traditional media, we don't really have many options. Of course, quality journalism is always a very important way, but of course, it depends on how the journalists and the media themselves perceive their function in a given society. We know, for instance, that in Southeast Europe and Greece in particular, we have many issues when it comes to having a balanced and neutral reporting of these issues. And it's something that is yet to become the standard in the media. Another important element is the synergies between traditional media and citizens. This is a very positive aspect of what we call citizen journalism. We see it. I don't think that this is something that we see very frequently in Southeast Europe, but we see it in other societies, for instance, in the United States or the UK, where media work together with the citizens to detect and report cases of excessive, let's say, one very important example was the use of excessive force from the police towards vulnerable groups. This is something very important. But of course, as an example, you can find many other applications. And of course, another important element is the social media platforms themselves and the need for them to regulate their functions and their content. We see it, for instance, in the US elections these days. We have reports that Facebook has already, also Twitter, they have deleted accounts and groups that were promoting hate speech and racism in the context of the elections. And of course, the inciting people, other citizens to use violence against specific groups. So this is always an option, even though it's not always as effective as we think that it could be. So a few notes on the importance of civil society. I think that there are many positive and very promising elements in the concept of civil society, particularly in this context of the digital environment. And Beck himself, in a very recent period, perhaps in a rather romantic conception, believes that civil society can, rather the cosmopolitan civil society, can really substitute or rather provide another layer of nationhood or of affiliation beyond the national one. And this is perhaps the best element that we have in the context of this world risk society. And himself, he specifies the following elements: the human rights imperative, the world market imperative, to see migration as the defining element of otherhood. This is something very, very important, I think. Also, because if you think this is before the mixed migration crisis, Beck is proposing to see migration as the defining element for otherhood. This means that we are all potentially carrying this element. This is very, as we understand, it changes our perception about difference. And of course, a continuous support for global generations and the civil society movements, and of course the local representation of all religions, which in other words can be read as the need to have constant dialogue and mutual recognition and knowledge between these structures. And in my final remark, I would like to say that always following Ulrich Beck, that the advantage of the cosmopolitan civil society is to create the conditions to create a shared perception for the future, which is something very, very challenging. I think that there are promising indications about that, but still we are reminded, particularly in the recent context of let's say the mixed migration, if we take as an example, that national racist rhetorics and policies are very much present. So this is to say that it's a struggle. It's a fight that we must give. And I think that perhaps it's very ambitious to speak of regulation and cohesion. Cosmopolitan approach, I think. Of course, regulation, as I described in platforms like Facebook or Twitter, is very welcome when it comes to very excessive and dangerous forms of communication. But I think the emphasis should be on coordination and mutual recognition. It's the difficult work that comes from the bottom and not necessarily from the top. And this is exactly the work that you do, for instance, and which I strongly admire. This is something that we can keep as a positive view on our future. Thank you for your attention, and I will start to share my screen. We will of course come back with our Q&A discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paskalidis. It is a very interesting topic to see. We have many young people who are on another Zoom who are actually discussing on the chat, and there's a lot of things that came up from your presentation. So I think in the Q&A session, we will have a lot of topics raised in terms of this. And as we are from Southeastern European countries, there's a lot of views on what is going on. But now going forward, to gender equality. Today we have two speakers in terms of on the topic of gender equality. The first one is Zefi Dimadama. Did I pronounce it correctly? Perfect. She's the vice president of the Party of European Socialists and also a member of PASOK in Greece. And she will give us a little bit an overview what is happening in Europe in terms of gender equality. Why is it important? And especially during COVID crisis, how is gender equality an important topic to work towards and actually prevent this risk of having an unequal society all around Europe? Please, the Zoom link is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, our moderator, for supporting us. And thank you very much, the organizer, for giving us the opportunity to speak in this very, very interesting and risk issue, let's say. We're going to explain why I say that. It's really important for us as PS Women, as the organization of women in the Party of European Socialists, to participate to different events. Now we have internet events, unfortunately or fortunately. So we're going to join more and more meetings in order to promote the gender equality aspect, because we strongly believe that this is really, really interesting, and it's not a luxury issue, especially in the pandemic era as we are now. And I strongly believe that our countries, I'm from Greece, and we work hard in the South and Southeast European countries to be visible as women, as young people, as young women, and work in the feminist issue. It's not easy, we know that. I'm vice president of PS Women, and I am responsible for the South Europe network. I'm also a lecturer in the Pantheon University in Athens, and work close with young people. And we faced a lot of challenges, but a lot of problems also. So I am here. I'm really happy to work with you. I invite you to contact us as PS Women, our network in the South region area. And it's important for us to exchange our views once more. I'd like to focus, first of all, in the interesting session that gender equality in European level. The European values are very important, and gender equality is one of them. So we are proud that we have managed in the European level to have the gender equality issue in our statements, in our frameworks. We have the Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union that there is about gender equality. We have the European Pillar of Social Rights at the chapter of fundamental rights. And of course, in 2019, we have a female European Commission president, and we have, thanks God, a commissioner for gender equality issues, for equality. This is something that is symbolic, but it's not only symbolic. We have worked hard for that, and we have published in 2020 a very interesting, let's say, strategy for how we can work and support gender equality in the European level. So this is something that I'd like to highlight. And I strongly believe that the gender equality issue is not just a topic. We need to find gender equality issue in all levels of European Union, in all sectors of policies. And this is something that we try to work. I think that this, the title of this session, the World Risk Society 2.0, is a challenge, and it's a really interesting topic that we have to discuss a lot of things here. Nationalism, as Mr. Paschalidis put in our discussion, the gender equality issues, and how we can work in economic issues, in economic collaboration, as our speaker next from gender equality work on that. Well, let me just focus on the COVID-19 period that we have now. And unfortunately, COVID-19 maybe has a female orientation. What that means that the pandemic, the COVID-19, is very dangerous for all of us, for men, for women, for young, for all people, of course. And it's an issue that we face all over the world. But unfortunately, the pandemic hit more women and young people. And this is not something we just say now because we are feminists, but this is what the surveys say about all this issue. We have women in the front line. We have nurses, we have women that work in healthcare general sector. We have women to have to support their families, to support children, to support old people, and now they have a lot of unpaid work. So when we talk about COVID-19, we need to have in our minds that women hits more. Unfortunately, the 60% of the young women, as the surveys say, are very skepticism about how their priorities, the career prospects will be during the pandemic and after the pandemic. How we'll go on in a very difficult world without the financial support, without the economic collaboration, without the next day of women and men after this healthy crisis, but also an economic and social crisis. Because COVID-19, it's not only a health crisis, as we all already know, unfortunately. are really afraid for also LGBTQI rights. We're afraid that we will have in the gender equality issues a step back because we have a lot of conservative governments that they take the excuse of the COVID-19, of the pandemic, and adapt a very conservative policies. As in Poland, we have in Poland and the issue of abortion. We saw that thousands of women go on the streets and stop this unbelievable law that the Poland government put in the discussion and say, now we have forbidden of the abortion. So this is a small win for women, but maybe a very big one, enormous win. We have Hungary. We have the Belarus women that go out and say that we need more democracy, we need more gender equality, we need more women and human rights. Because most of the time, the issues of democracy is very close with the issues of women's rights and human rights. We know that. We have the equal pay for equal value job. We have 16% less paid for women than men for the same job. This is something in European Union, not generally in our planet. And about 40% less pension to women than men. We have the sexual harassment, we have the issues of the violence in women, and we have a very difficult acceptance in the work, in the labor area. We need to work on that, we need to fight for that. And I want to ask you and ask us, all of us, what we're going to do, how we work with that, how we can go on as a European Union. Because the pandemic is here, we need to focus on the recovery plan issues. We need to demand part of the recovery plans will be in gender equality, on women empowerment. This is a fair demand. This is something that we need to work on. We cannot have the recovery plan without women, without feminist criteria. Because if every country take a decision how we will work with the money of the recovery plan, I'm not sure that most of the countries, I don't want to say most of the countries, but this is not an issue that we will be priority in our agenda. We need to insist on the Istanbul Convention that need to accept from all countries because the violence in the issue of women are very hard and hit very hard women. Young women and old women, all women and children, and sometimes men also. We have to underline that. So we need tools, and the tools in European Union is the financial tools, is how we can put this criteria, as we say, in the feminist budgeting, in the gender equality budgeting, and of course the gender mainstreaming. We need the gender issues will be part of every sector in European Union. But as we have a lot of time discussing the PS Women networks in our PS Women family and in my university and in PASOK with our women and our young women, the role of women and young women and men, the role of feminists are very, 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 very interesting. So all of you, all of us that we believe in a feminist world, we think that we need to organize ourselves. We need to join our forces. We need to have, to build bridges between us and have our community in order to demand, to support the gender equality issues and demand for more and more democracy and more feminist Europe. Because this is not just a feminist. It is not just a gender equality issue. We don't want just, to have a women movement. We need man. We're alliance here. We are all together. We need progressive policies. We need young people, all of you, to be part of the policy-making mechanism. We cannot just stay out and say, oh, we have some young people in our meetings. Good, very good. and just listen us and just say, yes, this is a very good, and oh no, it's not very good. We need to be part of the policy making. We need to join the parties, to join the NGOs. I have worked a lot of NGOs in Greece and in European level. And I think that we can work there. We can join our forces within NGOs, with the parties, with the PS women, with universities, with other organizations as Elia MEP, in order to be more visible. And just I want to close here because I think it's really interesting to have a discussion and take some questions from you. From me, I think that the participation of the young people, of the young women in this discussion and these policies are very is hopeful for all of us. Give us hope that we will go have a feminist world, a feminist future after the COVID-19 and now, every day, every minute, because a feminist world is also a fair world. Thank you so much, and I'm open to hear your questions or your whatever you need to discuss together. Thank you, and we are open in the PS Women to work together and exchange our views.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dimadama. It was very, very important to hear the overview of what is going on, and especially highlighting how the COVID-19 crisis is actually showing us that gender equality is a must in all of our societies, not only as the European Union, but globally, and working together and pushing together for a more equal and gender equal Europe, but also in our societies as in the specific countries. But you also gave a great hint towards our next speaker, Ms. Carolina Pereira. She has been working a lot around the world, specifically also on the project Satyam project. I hope I pronounced it correctly. She's also very active on social media, so make sure to follow her. We will put her in the comments in the chat section of the participants. But you are more doing the side from civil society, or the side from as an individual to participate and try to change the world in the sense of how we perceive gender equality and how we can actually achieve gender equality. And it was a very nice introduction, actually, from the previous speaker, that we should all unite into creating more opportunities for gender equality. The Zoom link is yours, please.
Thank you so much. I will just share my presentation as well. Let me see if, okay. So yeah, I have been, I usually, when I can, I identify myself as media, feminism, or human rights activist. Sometimes when I cannot say activist, I say entrepreneur because people like it. So I grew up, basically, I was a Scout girl very young, and I grew up with the sentence, leave the world a little bit better than you found it. And I feel that my journey, it's basically a search for who can leave the world a little bit better, and how can they leave the world a little bit better. And so, like, I will give you just a brief history of my path, because I mean, even if what I conclude from it is wrong, at least you know where it's coming from. So basically, I was a surfer, and I wanted to travel to Indonesia, but I again wanted to live a world a little bit better. So I wanted to have positive impacts and do something in there. So I saved some money, and when I was 19 years old, I traveled to Indonesia by myself and started working with the community there. And the idea, I just started a small project called My Destiny, and the idea was to turn kids into change makers through surf. But basically, what's important here is that that little project grew up as an idea and as an educational program. And it brought me to India when I was around 21, I think. And so 3 young girls went to India, and there we were invited as My Destiny and as surfers. But when we were there, we wanted to do something, so we searched the area and we found an orphanage called Ashankiran, and it was a girls' orphanage because the girls were what the family didn't want to. And also we wanted to work with some women who have suffered acid attacks by their husbands, and definitely we were too young for all the experiences. So basically we made a lot of plans in Portugal about what we are going to do and what we are, just the whole thing of um, not having the reality from there, but planning a lot of stuff from our own perspective. And so, of course, when we went there, we had to give up on all of our plans. And basically, that picture that you see at night was how we were planning every night what we were going to do on the day after. And it had to be like that, like listening to the community and planning what we were going to do. What happened is that basically we were able to work with the girls and the women, and 1 month after we were living on the shelter in around Orissa, Puri, the men started joining the initiative we called Girls Power Initiative. And we didn't believe that the men were bad. We believe that, okay, they do this because that it's cultural, or like it's part of what they learned that they have to do. And so we try to have that empathy and include them on the change. And so basically, one day some journalists starting approaching, and we were telling them about what we were doing. And you were having men who attacked their wives, this time helping them to have fun in the water and doing a lot of activities. And so long story short, those news went out, and basically I started working closer with the UN Women, because I got an award of like young promise, something like that. And so I started working a little bit closer with UN Women, and I got a mentor, and my journey through gender equality and women's empowerment started from there. Started in that trip to India, because I understood that if I wanted to create change, whatever that was, I needed to not only include women, but make them to lead the solution as well. So basically, this is like the group of girls that we worked with. And after that, I was invited to become an international advocate for He4She, and He4She is a UN Women movement for gender equality. And so I went to France, I had a training there, and then when I came back to Portugal, where I'm from, I needed to understand if He4She was going to make sense in Portugal, if He4She was needed, and if yes, how. And so we basically started with like an open meeting to a lot of women who are already leading organizations on women empowerment and women rights movements in Portugal, to understand and to learn from them as well, what could be our role. And basically we decided that we needed to move on with he for she, or mostly if we become a young movement for young people. And so he for she started growing around universities all around the country, and today it's like the national movement, the young national movement for gender equality. And then some young movements for gender equality in Portugal started showing up as well. And a lot of people who have been part of he for she started their own movements and organizations, and it's really amazing how all of that works. And actually hearing the previous presentation, it's amazing the change that we can create when we are definitely all together, women and men, because he for she, it's like a friendly men movement, and so they joined and they are leading, and it's amazing to see. And so yeah, this was like the big launching event in Portugal. And this is a picture from Satyam in India, in Chennai. And that's actually what I really want to talk to you about. So I tried it to be as fast as I could through all the paths through he for she. But basically, I wanted to give back to India, because I always felt that India taught me so much when I was there, and put me in this journey. And then I left and I was doing a lot of stuff in Portugal and other countries, and I felt that I really wanted to come back and give back to India with what I learned through these years. And so that's Saskia. She's the actual founder of Satyam, but she really doesn't like to speak in public. So every time I speak about Satyam, I put a picture of her as first. And basically, I will give you some numbers from India and the work that we did there, but I think that it actually applies then to everything we do. So basically, that we do in general, meaning Europe or elsewhere. So basically, it's a lot around who can leave the world a little bit better, and how can we do it. And so in India, like one in six girls don't get to 15 years old, and 11 million children on the streets, 90% of them are girls. And to have education, for girls to have education above 16 years old, it's considered a luxury. And so they are definitely to be a girl, to be born a girl, it's already equal to be unprivileged in a lot of, like in most of India. So sorry, okay. So basically, first we start with who, and I started understanding with my work there that a great way for me to contribute to whatever, like to try to change the world a little bit better also, is to amplify my platform, or for me, for a white woman as well, to give and share a little bit of my privilege. So basically, I understood that putting me in a humble position and basically being just a platform for them to get opportunities and to get tools was one of the best ways that I could have some impact in there. So I really believe that they are like the true and real change makers. And because when we think about who has the power or to change, or for example, when we say we can, a lot of times we are not thinking about the ones who are actually being most affected by those problems. So a lot of times we are in our own bubble trying to design some change, some programs for people who are on the streets or in some poor neighborhoods or who don't have access to education. And we are not truly and deeply trying to include them on the design of that solution or that program or whatever we want to put in there. So we a lot of times we see the non-privileged as the others, and they are not the others. They are a big part of the solution to leave the world a little bit better than we found it. And focusing on that, on the unprivileged people, women. And so basically in Satyam, we are trying to, girl by girl, women by women, break the cycle of poverty, or if you prefer to name it, cycles of non-privilege. And how do we do this? So we give them access to high quality education and tools for their independence. So we try to basically hear from them and design and give access that we a lot of times have, because we have the contacts and we have all of that, to basically give them the tools for their independence. So we do what we do because we believe that giving them the tools and giving them the training will make them active members of society. And if they are active members of society, they will decrease systemic inequalities. And we do that by, sorry, I was on slide 4, but basically we do this with in terms of education, but we also open the Satyam Cafe, and so which is totally run by women of the community, and all of the profits goes to pay the scholarships for the girls. And we also actually we were right about to open the Satyam Empowerment Center in March this year. I was there, but then I had to come back to Portugal in one day because of COVID. And yeah, so we are probably going to open it 2021, hopefully. And basically the Satyam Empowerment Center will allow us to basically welcome a lot of more, like almost 40 times more women that comparing with what we are doing now. And so a lot of times, like as I identify myself as an activist, a lot of times people ask me, what is activism, or what defines an activist, or, and then you have this whole argument, even inside of the activist movement, of activism, it's only going to the streets, like those are the activists, the other are like raising awareness or whatever, or the activists are like everyone from the social media ones to the ones who give talks or whatever. So for me, I really think that activism, it's a whole. We, as was said before, we need to organize most of all, because everyone is needed. And one thing in common, that from the mobilizers to the organizers to the campaigners, to all of them, one thing that they have in common is they really have to learn from the communities and from the unprivileged, and hear them, and again, not only include them, but made them lead the change. And so in some positive numbers that I have to share is that, for example, even in India, if 1% more girls went to school, the PIB in India would grow by $5 billion. And most important, women invest their income in India. We have seen that they invest their income by 90% on their family and their community, comparing with men who usually invest around 30%. And so definitely girls' education and women empowerment in general is one of the keys to change the world. But 2/3 of the population who has no access to education are women. And so we have a lot of work to do, and basically we have a lot to learn from these communities, because when non-privileged choose, they usually choose better because they know what's best for them. And sometimes we cannot see the link between what's happening in India or in Indonesia or in the States, or maybe that's a little bit easier, but still we don't see the link between what's happening in places that feel so far from us. But we live in a globalized world, and so we have the opportunity and Europe has the opportunity to decide to whom to give voice, or in whom to invest, or who to include when we are designing solutions. And so I thought a lot about what I was going to share in my 15-20 minutes here. And there's a whole thing to say about women empowerment and how important how important is the role of gender equality, and the whole spectrum inside of gender equality for us to have sustainable development, or for us to have like a diverse and world and a fair world. But and of course there were not enough time for everything. So I decided that the one message, or the one important message that I really wanted to share, is that we all have the power, and if we are here in this conference, we are already privileged probably, and so we all have the power to share a little bit of our privilege. And in my case, or in this case, I was talking about how to share it with women, and definitely women are like a huge driver for change. But it's just for us to think think a little bit about with whom do we want to share that privilege, and how can we become platforms to allow others to leave the world a little bit better than they found it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pereira. This was a very interesting topic in itself, because on the one hand, we had the political aspect of cross-sectionality in terms of politics and what politics can do to influence gender equality, to achieve gender equality. And on the other hand, we had Ms. Pereira, who had her personal story on what we as individuals can do in the aspect of gender equality, how we can participate in this process and create better opportunities for establishing and getting to gender equality. But moving on, so because we have limited time and wanting to open the Q&A session after everybody's finished, we have youth attachment as the topic, and here we have at least personally, a great friend, Andrea Ogrinovska, who is the chairperson of the Advisory Council of Youth of the Council of Europe. Together, we have been serving on the governing board of the National Youth Council of Macedonia. So it's a great pleasure to actually introduce you in a little bit different circumstances than we would usually talk. This topic is also very, very relevant when we look back and how different aspects of participation actually, or non-participation of young people influenced important political decisions. So you're in London and Brexit was one of them. You had a referendum where not a lot of young people participated in the referendum, but the next day they were on the streets protesting Brexit. So it's an interesting way to see how youth is functioning in today's world. And we would love to hear what you are doing. And I'm sure that you're doing quite a lot as the Council of Europe or the Advisory Council on Youth to engage young people and to motivate them. You can also follow them on social media. They are very active, and you can learn a lot of what is going on the European level. But the Zoom link is yours, Andrea, not to take too much away from you.
Thank you, Blažen, and great friends indeed. It's always a pleasure to meet you in such context. I want to thank all the panelists for their very interesting and thought-provoking inputs, and also to just extend my thank you to the Youth Alliance Crucial for inviting me for this very important session. I've always heard great stories about this conference. I never was lucky enough to visit it, so I'm happy to be present in a bit of a different role today with all of you. So as Blažen very kindly introduced me, I think we know each other's series quite well. I will also elaborate a bit more on that because I think it's important also for the audience to understand where I come from and where I draw my experiences when I make certain assumptions about youth detachment. So I'm Andrea. I originally come from North Macedonia, but I've been living and working in London, aka or UK, Brexit land, for a while now. So I moved somewhere right after the referendum. So Brexit was very prominent back then. And I've still stayed here, kind of going through all the consequences that Brexit brought on our table. I started my activism back in 2014 during the uprising in Macedonia. So there was a revolution that was aimed at overthrowing a government that was in place for a very long time. And I think somewhere around this time, I understood how passionate I am about societal issues. And I kind of proceeded towards looking for an outlet or a platform that could magnify my voice in this field. And that's how I essentially joined the NGO world in a way. I was, of course, a student back then, so joining a student organization was only the most logical thing to do. So I joined AEG Skopje, which is the European Students' Forum on a local level, and I was president before I got elected as chairperson on a European level. After that, I realized that I'm also very passionate about national policies. So I joined the National Youth Council of Macedonia firstly in the secretariat is responsible for international relations and national politics. And then I moved out of Macedonia to go to Brussels and Austria to study 2 master programs in European social integration and peace building. So I moved away from Macedonia and I joined the board I joined the board of the National Youth Council to somehow continue contributing to a cause that I always thought was very relevant. And I'm always kind of keen that even when we migrate or we move away from our countries, I really want to keep that link alive and see how I can improve things back home. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm also in this panel today. From there, my story moved to London, where I started working for the International Federation of Liberal Youth. So that's a network of political parties around Europe, or youth wings of political parties. And after that, I joined the British Youth Council as International Participation Coordinator. I'm currently the chair of the Advisory Council on Youth of the Council of Europe, for which I'll speak briefly. But that is basically my background. So I think from this, you can see that I have quite a lot of experience in both international youth NGOs, in national youth councils, which both of them being quite different, and then also political youth wings. And I can definitely say that within the 3 of them, while there are a lot of things that are common, there's also a lot of differences in terms of how they conduct their work. Right, so back to who I am and what is my current role. I'm the chair of the Advisory Council on Youth of the Council of Europe. And if this was an in-person event, I think I would have used my chance now to ask the audience, what's the Council of Europe? I think I always really enjoy getting all those answers, but I think that would make things slightly complicated, me asking that question now. So I'll just ask it and answer it myself, if that's okay with everyone. So And in trying to answer what the Council of Europe is, I think it's important to say that it's not the EU. It's actually a bit different. It's its predecessor. So the Council of Europe has much more member states than the EU does. Actually, all the 47 countries belonging to Europe are members of the Council of Europe, except Belarus, but we also hope that to change very soon. We work in 3 different fields, so human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And we also have the Court for Human Rights, which may be the institution that some of you will record here. Also, the Council of Europe has a very vast youth department, and they do a lot of youth policies. And some of you might have encountered some of the mechanisms we work with. So those are the European Youth Foundation, which gives funding to international youth organizations and national youth councils. Then we also have 2 youth centers, one in Strasbourg, one in Budapest. We have something that's called EU Council of Europe Partnership in the field of youth. So we cooperate with the EU when we create policies. And then we also have the Joint Council on Youth. And this is where the Advisory Council fits, basically. So the Joint Council is kind of like the governing structure of the youth department or the human dimension. It's composed of 2 counterparts. We have the Advisory Council on Youth of the Council of Europe that I chair, and where 30 activists sit. And then we also have the European Steering Committee for Youth, where representatives of the 47 member states of the Council of Europe that work in the field of youth, so government representative responsible for youth affairs in their countries, sit. So you can see we have the governmental part, and then we also have the activist part. And then we come together 2 times per year to co-decide on some of the most important aspects of the youth department. So in this way, we ensure that the youth department work is completely co-managed. And the reason why I always start my speeches by introducing what we do is because what we already do is revolutionary enough. And I will focus largely my speech around why is this so important. So the Joint Council is practically one of the only structures, and I dare to say that allows for meaningful youth participation. So that means that I, Andrea, representing the International Federation of Liberal Youth, have a same vote as the person representing the youth agency in France. So that means that we work on the principle of consensus, and whenever we are about to agree on a decision, young people and government representatives have an equal vote/an equal voice. Or if we are about to disagree on a decision we are about to take, then we're going to discuss until we get to a point that everyone can agree. And this is very, very important because we will be speaking a bit about youth participation, but there is a huge gap between youth participation as a structure and then meaningful youth participation, why one is more important than the other. Okay, so once who I am and where I come from and what I do is out, I am going to proceed exactly with the topic that Blažen introduced, which is kind of youth detachment. So I like to believe that youth detachment is not a new phenomenon. And if anything, and I think in the spirit of starting things on a positive note, I'll dare to say that there is much less detachment now than there might have been in the past, or in the last 100 years. But maybe not less, but maybe it's different. I think I'll leave it up to you to decide what does youth detachment look like now, and whether it has decreased from the past or whether it has taken a different shape/form. I think one thing still stands, and that is that older generations still struggle to hand over to newer generations in every possible aspect. So that means that we have a flawed education system, flawed participation methods, flawed mentoring, and all of that is fueled by lack of trust from both generations, so both the older one and the younger one. So the current one and the one expected to take over. So there is a growing, divisive intergenerational gap that kind of keeps on creeping in. And one of the questions I'm posing here is, do you think that has improved with technology? So do you think that with the heat of the pandemic and all of us needing to go online now, has that bridged the gap between older and newer generation, or has it actually made it even more solid and permanent? In any case, I think youth detachment can be observed through 4 different lenses. That's how I structured it. And I will briefly present them here and now, and also will suggest ways in terms of how these challenges can be overcome. And I think this is very important, that we as young people, whenever we ask to be included in processes, whenever we want our voice to be heard, I think it's very important that we don't position ourselves in this mode of lecturers. So we're not there to complain about our issues. We're not there to give lectures to decision makers about what we're suffering, but we're there to offer solutions. And I think this is the part that young people have to play very well, because this is how they prove that they're actually a resource in solving challenges, and they're not a target group that only knows how to list the challenges, but we are also the group that knows how to solve them. And this is what we're always fighting for. Okay, so the 4 types of detachment. We have electoral detachment, partisan detachment, public life detachment, and activism detachment. These are the 4 ones that I will quickly explain now before I finish off and give the floor back, because I'm really curious to hear your thoughts as well. I want to engage in a discussion as much as possible. So electoral detachment. I think when we look at the electoral detachment, the first thing that comes to mind is the low youth voter turnout. I will dare to say that this has also improved throughout the years, but I think it's no news that young people are not the strongest when it comes to kind of a youth voter turnout. And I think for us as youth workers, this is becoming slightly problematic whenever we need to advocate for young people, because essentially we don't have anything to showcase that young people are active and engaged, or that's what it may look like. I think that when we look at the demographic of young people and why young people are not voting, what I'm seeing is that there is a very clear gap. There is a group of young people which is completely disinterested in anything that happens with politics. They don't even go to vote. They don't follow. They don't want anything political. And then there's another group which is so dedicated that they put their life on the line to encourage and to create a space where youth participation is appreciated and kind of welcomed. So there are two kind of almost polarized group as a phenomena, and I'm not sure why things have developed this way, but that is something that we're seeing as a trend nowadays. And I think one of the prominent discussions here, or a remedy that I would like to offer, is a campaign that I've been working on with the British Youth Council for quite some time now, which is called Votes at 16. I would assume that some people in the audience have heard this already. It's a concept that's flying around Europe, not only in the UK. A few countries have started it. But in the UK, it started 10 years ago. It was led by the British Youth Council. And it started with a coalition of 5 or 6 MPs. And today we have a coalition of 200 members of parliament supporting change of legislation to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. So, for example, if we look throughout the timeline, I think that's a very big success. However, we have not fulfilled the final aim, which is actually making the legislative change and allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. So we believe that this legislative change can, on the long run, motivate young people to go and vote. And I think a lot of the people who are unconvinced by this wonder why. And I think one of the biggest anti-votes at 16 argument is that 16 and 17-year-olds are not ready to vote. And let me underline this, that they lack the education needed to be able to make an informed choice. But then our first question when we hear this replica is, does that then mean that the moment you turn 18, you're for some reason have more capacity and more knowledge to be an informed voter? And I think this is where they automatically lose the argument, because the issue is not that 16 and 17-year-olds don't have the education needed. The issue is that no one has the education needed to make an informed choice. So why is this legislative change so powerful? Is because we're not only asking to lower the voting age, but we're asking that to go in companionship with increased civic and political education. So we're basically saying we want to lower the voting age only on the condition you actually implement decent and proper civic and political education from college onwards. So then we kind of mitigate the fact that young people are, this ignorant group of people who don't know how to make the decisions for themselves, which the case is now, because our education system hasn't fostered for proper civic education anywhere, as far as I've heard, which I find it crazy. So by asking for this legislative change, we're making a larger kind of change of society and how we perceive politics, and why it's important that no one thinks that, oh, politics is something I don't want to engage with. But I believe that every person should have a bit of a spark on politics, because it's something that concerns everyone. The second point is that young people are too small of a target group for politicians. So in the same line, they do not offer much to them before and post-election, and they're creating a bit of apathy among young people that at the end of the day, there's no politician that truly represents their views and opinions. By allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, they kind of instantly become part of the electorate, and they force political parties to include them more and more in their programmatic work in an attempt to kind of get their votes. And by doing that, they bring faith to young people and the political parties care about them. Unless you're the conservatives in the UK and you're actually scared of allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote because you fear that you might lose the upcoming elections, because there is demographic data that young people would not vote for parties that have ignored them and disenfranchised them for a very long time. So I wanted to just give you a bit of a glimpse of what this discussion looks like. The second one is public life detachment. And I think in here, we need to be looking at the fact that while elections are a pretty big thing when it comes to youth participation and youth detachment, they're definitely not the only way for young people to participate. And I think that in truly developed democratic societies, between electoral cycles, there's lots of opportunities for young people to participate and to shape the politics that affect their lives. And this can be another mechanism to boost youth attachment, not detachment. So true and real democracies, for me, don't put all of their attention on elections. It is true that it's the first gateway for young people to get informed and to start participate, but it definitely shouldn't be the only one. And there need to be loops to bring experts in, young people, and there need to be feedback loops of how their opinion is taken into consideration. So it's important to also underline that I think many countries have developed mechanisms for young people to participate between electoral cycles. And I mean, even if you look at North Macedonia, we in theory have one on paper. It's a really well-developed co-management system. But the key here is not whether you have it, but how you implement it in practice. And when I speak of youth participation in this context, I always mean a co-managed youth participation. And this is what I was speaking before when I told you how we take decisions in the Council of Europe and how it's important that everyone in the room has an equal vote. And so it's quite revolutionary because it's co-managed on the principle of consensus. So each stakeholder on the table, government or not, must have an equal voice on the decisions being taken. What's happening very often, so what is the phenomenon that we see with youth participation is tokenism. So decision makers are starting to learn that having young people present in the room is cool and funky and it works very well in terms of PR. But then when it actually comes to taking their opinion into consideration, no one comes back to give any feedback to them of how their decisions were being taken. So I think that this is very, very dangerous when we include young people to participate in a tokenistic manner. I dare to even say that it's more dangerous than not having any participation mechanism at all, because by bringing them and constantly not allowing for their voice to be really prominent, heard, and taken into consideration, you're on a long term depreciating their faith in the system completely. So honestly, if you're about to develop a decision-making system where you want to bring young people in, and if your intention is not to make it meaningful, my sincere advice is not do it at all. But however, on the long term, if we actually create meaningful participation processes where young people can join, can have their voice will be heard, their voice will be taken into consideration, then I think on the long term, this will obviously increase the faith of young people in the system, and therefore maybe even in the next election, increase the voter turnout. So what do I mean by tokenism? Just quickly, I wanted to explain. For example, in Macedonia, we were drafting the youth strategy that was about to last for 2 years, and they decided to bring young people in. It's logical, right? You're designing a youth strategy, and the only logical thing to do is to bring the young people in to hear their voices. And for example, let's say you're a young person in that room and you raise your hand and you say, I think as part of this strategy, there should be mental health included because I have data and evidence that a lot of young people are suffering with their mental health. The consultations finish, the youth strategy document comes out, and you do not see mental health anywhere. And you do not even get an information from the facilitators of why they didn't include it. So this is tokenistic youth participation. This is bringing young people in the room, but not actually hearing what they have to say. Only 2 ones remaining, and I will go through them very quick. The third one is partisan detachment. So I think that if we observe youth detachment from the public life, I think we need to look at its root causes. Political parties. So what is the trend among political parties when it comes to including young people? And there are 3 scenarios: pre-elections, during election, and post-election. I wanted to also ask whether there's anyone that's a member of a youth wing or a political party here, because if you are, it would be interesting to hear your views on this. So I think we need to look at how young people participate in political parties, and they have youth wings, which already is a very great step forward, because it means that parties usually recognize that young people are a specific target group and they have their own way of organizing and they have their own way of influencing. So I think the fact that youth wings, political youth wings exist is a really great step. But if we are to actually understand whether this is meaningful, we need to dig a bit deeper. So we need to see what is the status of the youth wings. A lot of political youth wings share the same kind of finances with the mother party. So that's in a way kind of cutting their freedom to do things their way. Many times they're very largely controlled by the party, so they don't have their own voice. And I think the most important one is how are they integrated throughout the party. So when we look at elections, and I think I've always said this, we need to look at two things. We need to look at the programs that political parties offer for young people, and then we also need to look at how they include young candidates. So what happened at the last elections, for example, in Macedonia, but also all around the world, every political party has an incredible developed youth strategy of how they're going to include young people throughout the mandate and how important this is. And you know, you're reading it and you're thinking, oh my God, for the first time, thank God, political parties are actually focusing on young people. And then you go and check the list that political parties have put forward for elections, and you see that there is no single young person on the list. So is this genuine? Is this honest? Do you think that political parties cares for young people at that given moment and will care in the future? Or another case scenario is actually seeing a young person on the list, but the young person is so low on the list that it 100% won't win a seat. Or there's also a very interesting third trend that I've seen in the EU. Now political parties have started sending young people in Brussels because they don't really care about Brussels, but we can still showcase that we put young people forward. So send all of them in Brussels. So now the European Parliament is full of young people, which we are very happy about. But are they actually in a position of power to make the differences? Or is this just another PR stunt? It's something that we need to be looking at. And the last one, activism detachment. And I guess that we're all suffering a bit from this one. And I think it happens, for me personally, is the most painful one. And I think it happens when young people have been advocating for a cause that they believe in for so long without seeing any tangible change, that they in a way start kind of feeling powerless and like their work doesn't matter. This also has large impacts on their mental health, and essentially it's a big factor that contributes to your detachment. And I think the new digital generation likes things fast. So as a young person, I want it all and I want it now. And when I spend a year or 2 or 3 advocating for a cause, and when I don't see any change being made, I think young people are much more prone to take things personally and to have that affect their mental health, and to also have withdrawal symptoms, just in a way that they don't want to engage with this anymore because they don't feel like they're making a change. And I think what's a remedy here, and what's very important, is that we always, as activists, especially as youth activists, we need to learn how to take a step back. We need to find a way to regain faith in the topics that we advocate for. But I think more than that, and hopefully this brings us back to the famous mantra in activism work. I know it's very cliche, but I'll say it, and that is, be the change you want to see in the world. I think sometimes when we feel powerless, the biggest thing we can do, or the most powerful change we can do, is the one that starts with ourselves. Cool. Okay, that was all from me. Gosh, it was very fast. I'm sorry if I spoke very fast. That's generally one flaw that I have. But Blažen, my dear buddy, over to you.
Thank you very much. There were a lot of comments about the education part that you have mentioned with the Vote 16. So there's an interesting discussion among participants, and I hope they raise a hand and also ask a question or raise a topic and discuss a little bit with you guys of what is going on. And there was a lot of comments about your Marina Abramović poster behind you. So a lot of the participants are fans of Marina Abramović, as far as I can see. But now, and thank you very much for your input. It was great having you and seeing the perspective that you have on the things in terms of youth and youth attachment and how we can move things forward. But now I would like to open up the Q&A session, and I would invite the participants on Zoom to raise their hand if they want to ask something, raise another opinion, give another view on things. There were a lot of questions, and it would be not interesting if I would read the questions for you once you have it in the chat. Be an echo, be a voice, not an echo. So please raise the hand. We have the first raised hand is Eva Završnik. I hope I pronounced it right. Do we have her online? Oh yeah. Do the panelists hear her? Yes? Perfect.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I would actually like to ask Ms. Pereira a question, and I want to introduce a topic of voluntarism or volunteering tourism, and maybe what is her opinion on that. So it's basically like a tourism where people travel abroad to a destination that is predominantly considered undeveloped. And nowadays, research has shown that it also has a lot of negative impacts, especially in regards to the volunteering in orphanages. And the problem is that many volunteers are either unskilled, they can be taking local jobs, there's no long-term commitment of volunteering, which can be traumatic to the children. So it's also perpetuating this white savior complex. So my question is, how can we responsibly benefit those communities and help them tackle gender inequality as well without acting as white saviors? And maybe if you answer this question in regards to the Satyam project. Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva. Before giving the floor to Ms. Pereira, we have another question from Roxana Irot. Do we have her here somewhere?
Yes.
Here you are.
Hello, everyone. I have a question regarding feminism. It has been said during this meeting that we need a feminist society because it would be a just society. And regarding this statement, I just want to say that how can we achieve a feminist society as long as we don't have a unified feminist ideology? For example, different branches of feminism disagree on how should women be represented in the media or how they should dress in general, like more revealing clothes can be called over-sexualization or objectification of women, and that would be a form of discrimination because they are seen only as sexual objects. But another branch of feminism says that it's empowering to dress more provocative because they are in touch with their sexualization and their self. And these are both feminist views, but they are different. So how can we achieve a feminist society as long as feminists cannot agree on a common vision of how that society would look like?
Two questions towards our gender equality panel. Ms. Pereira, the first one was for you, so please go ahead and then we'll go to the next panelist.
Sure. So hello. Yeah, so I don't really believe in voluntarism for all the reasons that you have said. I think there's basically some I would say, I don't know, preconditions that can make it not so bad. For example, at Satyam, we decided that the least time, like you have to, if you want to go to Satyam and if you want to volunteer in there, first of all, we don't take a lot of volunteers because that's actually negative for the community to always have people entering in there. And we really like, because the girls and women live on a shelter, like, or we call it the house or whatever, but and we want that space to be a safe space for them. And so in terms of volunteering, if you want to go there, you have to spend there at least 6 months. And Satyam is actually totally run by local women. So we started because we do love it, and we, for example, we do the fundraising part and we do a lot of that, but all the local decisions, all the strategy of what happens next or to where are we going, it's all just hearing from them. And so if someone wants to volunteer in there, it has to be at least 6 months. And it's not like you are going there to do whatever you want. It's you are going there to really help on whatever they say they need help. So basically, if we see it like that, if we see it as, okay, here we have more hands to do this that we really need to do, and that otherwise we would have to pay for it, and that it will cost, I don't know, a lot of money for them. If we see it like, okay, I'm genuinely giving my time to serve the best, whatever you want me to do in here, great. And actually, like, people when they go there, because they all of these, and because we have a lot of calls with them, they are really committed. So it's not like I'm going there in the morning and then I'm going, I don't know, doing something else in the afternoon. It's really because they want to be super involved, and they are working there all day with them. And so, yeah, I think that's an option, and that's voluntarism anyway. So I would say, like, in general, as fast answer, I don't really believe in voluntarism because I don't believe it gives mostly when, you know, those kind of things that you have to pay and you spend there 1 week and you do whatever activity that you want, you are not really building on a long lasting change. And so the only way for it to be positive is if you just join a process that it's already going and it was designed by the whole community.
Perfect. Very much. Thank you very much for your answer. So the second question was, how can we actually unite as feminists in the different views that there are in feminism, and how we can join jointly into one perspective? Please, Ms. Damadia.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a great, big madama. Okay,
Yeah.
it's okay. It's okay. Have a great moderator, so it's okay. The names are, strange sometimes. I cannot say your name also. So thank
No
you
worries.
for asking great questions. And yes, there is different views and aspects of feminism, but I strongly believe that we have a basic core. We have a core that we agree on that. And this core has a specific values. Let's say the justice, the equal rights, the opportunity to have the same opportunities in our lives, in work, in life, to love, to join the politics. So I think that we have to accept a basic values as the European Union, let's say, support in their texts, in their documents. And then, of course, we can discuss more about some difficult views. But I strongly believe that we have problems and we need to have steps forward in the basic issues, in the labor market. The opportunities that we have in the labor market, men and women, is totally different. The equal pay. So this is something that I think we cannot disagree. This is the basic value. Of course, it's strongly different in Greece, maybe in Germany, in Scandinavian countries, let's say in Africa or India, okay, this is totally another world, and we need to work for them, for these women and these children also. But specifically in European level, we have a very specific core to work together and demand our values to be part of the sectors, the policies of European level. Of course, as I say, my young feminists in Greece, we need to be part of NGO, part of parties. We need to somehow to participate, and not just to participate for clapping the parties or clapping the leaders or clapping and say, oh, yes, good. We need to have, an alive participation and say a different word and try to join ourselves. And I'm personally also in PS Women, and please ask you to join our social media and Facebook, in Twitter, PS Women social media. Try to attract women and take, the opposition, because it's not easy for us to join different ideas and join what you think that this is feminist, because I think that this is something else. Because in a theoretical way, okay, in academic level, let's say, we have the feminists and what is the feminist, the waves of feminism. We have read a lot of books, a lot of articles, but we need to join our forces, as I say. And for me, the important issue is to join, to synthesize also different views. And the different views is not only a matter of parties, of course, and other views. We have the progressives and other conservatives, but it's strongly interesting to have the younger views. From my side, I have a lot of people that they say, I am very interested on the opportunities that we will have in the labor market, and especially in the academic level, because in academic level, we have fewer and fewer women in Greece, and not only in Greece, I'm sure. So we need to change the discussion. We need to join all of us to join the discussion. And of course, I strongly believe that the women need to give their hands to the younger women. The solidarity, it's something really interesting. We need to do it on real and not just saying and have a beautiful, word and kind word that we are open. We need to be open in European level, in the PS women, in our parties, in our communities, in university, to hear the other women and give them opportunity to be here with us, to represent us somewhere else from the PS women, let's say, from another NGO, and not just to have one woman that come there and again and again and again, the same issues. So this is my view, and I'm here, to join the situation. And just to say that I don't like, because I'm in PASOK and our party, a lot of times I'm hearing men that is about 40 years in the political level in the parliament, and they say, now I will talk for young people and young women, and you are 65, you are 40 years in the parliament, please let the younger just say their views, not you to say for me or for younger people or whatever. Hear them. This is, the key that we need to adapt in everyday life. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your great insight, Ms. Dimadama. I hope now I pronounced it perfectly. Okay.
Great.
We have, I think, a little bit more than 10 minutes left for questions and answers, and I have Anna Bampili, I think. Anna Bampili. I did pronounce your name right, Anna, right?
Yes, you did.
Perfect. The Zoom is yours.
Okay, I have a question and a comment for Dr. Pascalidis. So recently, the extreme right nationalist party Golden Dawn was characterized as a criminal organization by the Greek court, putting its leaders and key members into prison. So there are two things that we have to take into consideration. Firstly, many of those members are not directly involved in criminal activities, and many members of lower hierarchy are still free to carry these ideas. And secondly, a huge part of their electorate, which is now absorbed by other political parties, is still vulnerable to populist speech, and they remain radical despite switching parties. So these facts, combined with the fact that imprisoned members promote themselves as political prisoners, make me question a little bit the effectiveness of criminalizing ideas rather than allowing them expose themselves and consequently lose. So are we any close to that? I mean, criminalization? And according to your opinion, should we feel like we muted nationalism in Greece or like we gave it a volume up for the upcoming years? Thank you.
Great question. Before we go to answers, let me take just two more in from Joanna Freitas. Freitas? Joanna?
Yes. Hello, good morning.
Hi.
I'm Joanna from Portugal, and I have a question / thoughts for Andrea about your intervention. You said that there's a trend to see these young people who don't get involved at all and those who completely devote to it. And you said it's an interesting thing to see. But for me, it's quite clear why that happens, because I don't see any other way. As in, I've tried to get involved in things and seen my access stop because I was not involved enough in NGOs or in parties and so on. And sometimes it really feels like I would need to quit my job and really just go the political way to be able to get involved. And that takes me to another issue, which is you keep seeing the same suspects. Let's see, whenever I do get a chance to participate in a conference, in an event, some kind of public decision-making consultation, you always end up seeing the same people or the same profiles. You look at the CVs, and the people, all of them are mostly higher education students, political sciences, sometimes engineering. So you keep seeing the same people. So I know that it's up to us to join NGOs and parties and so on, but also it's not always that easy. If you're not a student, if you had to work because you couldn't afford higher education, then you cannot join a student association. If you are from a region where there are no NGOs, it will be very hard for you to start something from the ground at the same time as you are working. So on the other side of the table, of the people who already are in, what is being done to increase representation and involve more people? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your opinion and a viewpoint, and I think Andrea will follow up on that. And the final question of this bunch is Francesco. Is it a comment question?
A question. The question which is related, well, I'm part of the IGP team of this conference, so I'm quite concerned with the effectiveness and the result that we can reach with this conference. So I have a question for Andrea Ugrinosca. And the question is, when we're talking about having the voice of youth heard, like we're trying to do with this conference, how do we make it effective? Because what I feel is that, like, politics, rather than listening to voices, listen to interest. And the difference between voices and interest, to me, is that the interest is concrete and it's structured. So it's really, I really believe in this kind of conferences in which we can discuss and express our opinion. But how do we translate this into action and into a strategy? How do we structure it? Like, do you have any suggestion on how this conference can be more efficient and effective in terms of action, also in the long term? How do we structure it in the way that we can build on results year after year? Might not be an easy question to answer, sorry.
Thank you very much for the question, Francesco. And we go straight ahead with Mr. Pascalidis. Please, the question from Anna.
Yes, thank you, Anna, for your very interesting and important question. Actually, what happened in Greece with Golden Dawn and the decision of the court is a landmark decision, of course, and we will wait to see if there will be any repercussions in the European context with regard to that, other far-right parties. But because you mentioned a very important notion, the criminalization of ideas, it's not something new. For instance, in France, we have it with examples like historical revisionism. For instance, in France, we cannot publicly deny certain historical events like the Holocaust or other genocides. So this is something, this is another important aspect. But of course, it opens up a debate also in that case when it comes to criminalizing ideas. In my sense, the ideal way to respond to all this is the democratic way, is to have these parties, these narratives, these discourses marginalized with the democratic process, meaning that to have them in the margin, not have them in the political, let's say, have them in more political presence. But of course, we cannot rely also on justice to do this work. It's, I think, what I mentioned about the mixture of a digital public sphere with fake news and the climate of post-truth and all these excessive discourses, it's a very explosive mix, and it's time for many of us, be it researchers, journalists, politicians, to look ourselves in the mirror and realize that we have a responsibility not to not to circumvent when we are in face of such discourses. We must engage in criticism with them when we cannot tolerate them. And I think this is the best way. This is the democratic way, the public engagement, the public debate that will eventually create the space to for more not only democracy in an abstract way, but for the human rights discourse and other very important cornerstones of our democratic societies. This is my perception, but I think it's a very important debate that will continue, because just to give you a final note, even in the case of the social media platforms and the removal of accounts, this is something. We can say that this is a half measure. You can eradicate a group, you can eradicate an account, but how do you respond to the narrative in society? This takes place only in the basics: education, media, and our engagement as not only citizens but also as digital citizens. So this is my understanding, let's say, and but thank you for raising this issue, Anna.
Thank you very much for your answer, Professor. Andrea, please, the questions that were raised to you.
Thank you, Blažen. I'll just say that these are very difficult questions, and I'm very amazed at the level of engagement present among the participants. So thank you very much for challenging me in this way. I will do my best to answer it, so please bear with me. The first question I got, I think, was speaking along the lines of, how do we become moderate activists, right? So how do we not belong to any of the groups that I mentioned? So how people who are not engaged at all can find modes to get engaged without that needing to be their life priority, their job, getting money out of it or whatever. So how do you get engaged with your free time? I think is what I understood. And I think, it's there's no one size fits all. And I absolutely hear you, what you're speaking of. And I think that might have been the reason why I started doing this professionally, because I just kind of jumped in the whole thing all in. I was also not able to find the middle ground where I could be an active citizen without that kind of taking my whole life with it. But I also do want to underline that should not be the only way to participate. So my mom is, for example, a person whom, if I ask her now, do you know that there are elections in the US? She'll say, no, what, who, why, who's Trump? This kind of a moment where she's completely detached because she believes that this is taking up too much of her space and time and energy. She's a workaholic, she works a lot, and she just doesn't want to spend her extra time on politics. And I think I would never say anything against that, because I think that it's very important that every person tailors their input and their engagement according to their needs, according to their time. And I think in this context, it's important to know that everyone does their best. I disagree with my mom because I think that she didn't even try to give it a chance to understand or to be engaged. So this is constantly the friction that me and her have. But then I also think one of the root causes for that is lack of proper civic education. So that means that we've grown up in an education system that hasn't told us that this is a very important civic duty that we have. I mean, look at the UK. In London, if you don't vote, your credit score gets completely destroyed. So that means that by the fact that if I don't go vote on local elections, I won't be able to take a loan to buy a flat. So I think we're getting into this mode that it's not just a mere desire anymore, but all of us have civic duties and responsibilities that we need to fulfill. I personally blame the education system for not telling me that this is my duty and this is something that, no matter how busy I am, when I go to the bank to pay my bills, well, that should be the equivalent to going to vote. So it's a duty. It's not your matter of choice. Then, if you want to go beyond your duties and actually, volunteer a bit of your extra time to an extra cause, that's great for you. But there needs to be a basic minimum where we all understand that this is not a choice anymore. This is something that impacts all of our lives. But again, starting from this point where we are now, I think that is difficult because we've missed 8 years of being educated on what this means, why it's important, why, it's needed that all of us go and vote. And I think it goes a bit about what I was saying around activism fatigue, and feeling that you're not doing enough and feeling the need that no matter what job you have, if that job is not philanthropic, then you're not doing enough and you need to invest your whole life in it. And for a young person, this can be a very heavy burden to carry. So I want to ask anyone who feels that way to try to shake it off, because even if, I don't know, today you decide to pick up one trash from the street, you probably would have done more than 50% living in that country. And we're all doing the best that we can. I think what's important is that you are aware that this is, this is something you could be contributing to or you could be helping, as long as you fulfill your minimum civic duty and responsibility. And then from there on, no one can judge you about how much you contribute. So as long as you have the education, you know what you're doing, the rest is up to you to give as much as you want. And you should not allow anyone to judge you on that basis, because we're all doing our best and we're all doing very good in certain aspects and very bad in others. So yeah, I don't know if that calms you a bit, but the second thing that you've also asked is about the same suspects. And I think this is a very interesting phenomena to observe. And I think that I found myself in moments when I have been very annoyed that they're usually always the same suspects in the same room, but then I found myself being that same suspect very often as well. So I think it goes both ways. I think that when we speak about the same suspects, we need to be looking at what are they doing in this space? Is their role relevant, or are they here just to fill the space out, or are they here because they've been doing this for a very long time? So something I took self-critically as myself, I started rejecting offers to go on certain conferences because I thought that I am too present and too visible, and I felt that other voices should be heard more. So very often I found myself in a position where I would say, actually, I think you should take a different person who would be better than this. I know that you've invited me because you've seen me at a conference, you think it's an easy way out, but you should dig deeper. So sometimes I find myself in a position where I say, actually, I'm going to be the change that I want to see, and I'll start it this way. And I think the second one to that is, how do we reach to unorganized youth? And this is a very intense debate happening on a European level right now, whether institutions or, wherever the youth input is needed, whether they should be reaching out to unorganized youth. Because I think that when we speak about the usual suspect and when we speak about unorganized youth and how important they are, we are also downgrading how important organized youth is. And if someone has been in a place for many years and has really learned the expertise of the youth issues and youth challenges, then we shouldn't be punishing this person simply by virtue of them being too long in the field and telling them, well, actually, you cannot attend this conference now because you've been here for too long and you're a usual suspect. So I think it's a very fine line. I absolutely agree with you that sometimes it just becomes too much and you're like, okay, there needs to be a change and diversifying. But when we reach out to unorganized youth and when we talk about how do we make it more diverse, we shouldn't downplay youth organizations and what they've done so far, because I think that they are also really trying very hard to kind of improve their outreach. And it's generally a common challenge. Outreach is a challenge. Getting people excited around these topics, which are maybe not as sexy, is a challenge. Root causes, again, education, because it's the first time they're seeing it. The second one, I think it's a bit difficult for me to answer it because I don't know very well how the conference works and what you can do to be more impactful. But I think it looks at two different things. It looks at how do we make sure that young people's input is not only a desire, but it's actually a well-thought intervention, if I understood well. And then the second one is, how do you make this conference more impactful? What do you do with it? In terms of how to make young people's inputs more structured and more relevant, I think there's one thing that we need to understand, again, stemming from civic education. Young people have not had any encounter with the political world before. So for many of them, this is the first time that they actually learn what it means to be an active citizen, what it means to have an opinion on certain topics. And we need to be very patient with them because they don't process data the same way a typical politician would that has been in that context for a very long time. So that's why I always say, when you bring young people to a conference and if you want their input to be genuine and meaningful, don't give them the same printout document that you give to people who've worked in this field for 100 years, because they're not going to be able to decode it. You need to simplify it. You need to prepare them. You need to tell them what's in it for them. So, you need to work with them. And this is where youth work is very important. This is what we're doing at this conference, is we're saying there's a huge world out there where young people could be inputting, but it's not as easy as throwing them in that space. They need to be supported. And that's why we kind of encourage youth work in this case. And how can you make your conference more impactful. I think I can tell you what I've done in similar cases. I think that by the end of this conference, you're coming up with a document, some sort of a declaration that all of you agree on. I think it's, first of all, very important to have all young people on board when you compile this document. So to make sure that everyone's voice is in there, is heard, is appreciated, is taken into consideration, because that way you also create allies who are going to support you in implementing that recommendation. And then what I would do is I would do quick pit stops. So in the course of next year or two, organize meetings where you give updates of what you've done with the recommendation. I don't know if the goals of it are for things to be implemented, but organize these catch-ups where you give feedback to young people and you tell them, you know what, with this recommendation, we went to the UN, we spoke about this, we did this, or we went here, but we failed. And this is how you create that feedback loop. And this is how you also keep the young people engaged, and you also give them more leverage for them to do their own advocacy work too. So I don't know if that answered it. I know we're very out of time, so I'll stop now, but also please do share my email, because I'm happy to elaborate more.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for the elaborate answer on the two questions that you had. I'm very sure that the YAC team will send out the information so you can stay in contact with the participants. I see one raised hand, Kata Philip, but we are very well over time, so I'd ask you to maybe send the question via email to the panelists, and so they can elaborate on your question in terms of that, because we are 10 minutes over time. And we have to continue with the following activities. But it has been my true pleasure to actually be the moderator of today's panel, and thank you very much to the panelists who were 2 hours here talking on three very important topics that in the future will have an impact, and we can start today working on all of them. And I think this is the core message that we have to take away, regardless of nationalism or racism, regardless of gender inequality or youth attachment. It's up to us, the young people, to actually bring forward solutions and create a better society than what we got when we were growing up. So thank you very much to all. Thank you very much also to the participants who have been very actively also in the chat, but also...
You can consider our emails in all of participants just to send us questions or whatever we need. We are open for that, and this is the positive issue of this.
Thank you very much. Perfect. So with that, I would like to close today's morning session, and we will continue, I think, at 4:30 with the next panel, where we will discuss not the topics that we discussed at this moment. So thank you very much once again to everybody for being here and opening up the discussion.